Did you know that the first European settlement deep inside this country was wiped out in a single night? 6 forts across hundreds of miles, destroyed at the same moment by people who supposedly had no way to coordinate. That a 6-year-old vanished here in 3 minutes, with Green Berets and 1,400 searchers, and was never found? And that the rock under your feet is older than bones, older than trees, older than the rings of Saturn. Appalachia is not just hollers and coal and mist. It is older than the ocean beside it, stranger than the science that studies it, and full of things nobody has explained. Here are 21 Appalachian mysteries that are real, documented, and still cannot be explained. 21. The Brown Mountain Lights. Most people who hear about mysterious lights in the woods assume car headlights or a reflection. That was the official explanation too, twice. In 1913 and again in 1922, the U.S. Geological Survey sent investigators to Brown Mountain in the Pisgah National Forest near Morganton, North Carolina. Geologist George Mansfield concluded the orbs were trains, cars, and brush fires. Case closed. Except here's what nobody told Mansfield. The lights were first recorded in 1771, before cars existed, and in July 1916, a flood wiped out the railroads and power lines across the Catawba Valley for weeks. The trains stopped. The lights kept appearing. The part that got me is more recent. Dr. Daniel Caton of Appalachian State and his engineer Lee Hawkins ran 2 time-lapse cameras at the mountain for 17 years. On July 16, 2016, both at once caught a ball of light that flared and vanished 4 times. Caton's conclusion, on the record, no explanation. Officers reported orbs floating past them that same month. So if it isn't headlights, isn't trains, and survived the summer the valley went dark, what is producing a light 2 cameras can record but no one can name? 20. The mountains that should be flat. You'd expect the Appalachians to be young. They look soft, rounded, gentle, nothing like the jagged Rockies or the Himalayas. The rock tells a different story, the kind of thing I had to read twice. They began forming around 480 million years ago, and at their peak, during Pangaea, stood comparable to the Andes. Here's the rule that makes it strange. A range with no plates colliding beneath it has no engine. 300 million years should grind it to a flat plain. That's what dead mountains do. These didn't. In 2013, geologists Sean Gallen and Carl Wegman at North Carolina State University found that parts of the southern Appalachians have grown taller in the last 8 million years. Relief in the Cullossaga River Basin increasing by more than 150%. Their explanation? A slab of dense rock peeled away, and the lightened crust rebounded upward. But their own paper admits it's a best hypothesis, not a confirmed cause. So if there are no plates pushing them, and 300 million years should have flattened them, what is lifting a range that, by every rule we have, is supposed to be dead? 19. The Lost Sea. Most people picture a cave as a tunnel, a passage with an end. You walk in, you walk out. 140 feet under Sweetwater, Tennessee, inside Craighead Caverns, there's a lake instead. Guinness certifies it as the largest underground lake in the United States. It was found in 1905 by a 13-year-old named Ben Sands, who threw mud balls into the dark to listen for splashes. But the visible lake isn't the mystery. What's past it is. And this is the part I keep coming back to. Beginning in 1974, a cave diving team led by Tom Mount and Bill Schenck spent 2 years mapping the chambers beyond. They added 1,500 feet to a single passage and never reached a wall. And in that water, they found something impossible: anthodites, crystal formations called cave flowers, which only form in dry air. They proved the chambers were once dry, then they flooded. No one can explain how. So if those crystals prove the caverns were once dry, and divers in 50 years have never found a wall or a source, what filled a sea deep under a mountain, and where does it still drain to? 18. Judaculla rock. You might think a carved rock would eventually give up its meaning. Enough experts, enough time, somebody reads it. Not this one. In Jackson County, North Carolina, sits a soapstone boulder carved with more petroglyphs than any rock east of the Mississippi. 1,458 cut marks, 47 curving figures, deer tracks, claw marks, and a single winged shape, carved between roughly 200 and 1400 CE. It's been studied for over a century, and I still can't find anyone who can read it. The Eastern Band of Cherokee hold it sacred, the mark of Sul Kalu, a giant spirit and his stepping stone into our world. A Forest Service archaeologist, Scott Ashcraft, put it plainly. Some think it's a story, some a map, and we can't be sure. The Cherokee reading explains the boundary marks, but not the 1,458 cups, the most common symbol on the rock. The map theory explains the spacing, but decodes none of the abstract shapes. Every interpretation explains part of the rock. None explains all of it. So if it's the most studied petroglyph in the eastern United States, why can no one say what 1,500 years of carving was meant to say? 17. The Seneca guns. You hear a boom that rattles your windows. You assume a sonic boom, a quarry blast, thunder. Now take all of that away. No jet, no quarry, no storm, no earthquake on any seismograph. That's the Seneca guns, deep booms heard across the Appalachians and Carolina coast for 2 centuries. James Fenimore Cooper wrote about them before 1850, saying they answered to none of the known laws of nature. The U.S. Geological Survey keeps an official page on them, stating that many cannot be explained by any man-made source. In March 2019, a series rattled the North Carolina coast. The USGS confirmed no earthquake. NOAA found no atmospheric cause. In 2020, a researcher named Brenhan Bird at UNC Wilmington presented the study yet, and this is the detail I find maddening. The booms travel through the air, not the ground, in bursts of 1 to 10 seconds. But his array couldn't triangulate the source, and the array needed to locate it has never been built. So if it isn't thunder, a quarry, or a jet, and registers on no seismograph, what is firing a sound across 3 states from a point no instrument has ever found? 16. Track Rock Gap. Most people assume that if native carvings survive on protected public land, we at least know who made them. Here, we don't. At Track Rock Gap, in the Chattahoochee National Forest of North Georgia, 6 soapstone boulders hold more than 100 carvings. The oldest activity goes back at least 3,600 years, older than the Parthenon. The Forest Service's sign admits no one knows the meaning of the symbols. Then it gets stranger. In 2011, a Creek researcher named Richard Thornton claims the terraces above the carvings, including 154 stone retaining walls, were built by Itsamaya, who had migrated into Georgia. The reaction was a rare 3-way rejection. The Forest Service, the Cherokee Nation, and the Muskogee Creek Nation all dismissed it. Underneath that fight sits a quieter dispute I don't think was ever settled: whether the symbols are idle graffiti or a system matching glyphs at Muskogee and mound sites. Then, in 2020, vandals defaced carvings on 5 of the 6 boulders. So if no one can agree whether it's graffiti, a writing system, or a migration nobody believes, how do we decode 3,600 years of marks that someone destroyed before the argument was finished? 15. The Devil's Tramping Ground. You'd expect a bare patch in a forest to have a simple cause: poor soil, an old fire, something a soil scientist could close out in an afternoon. About 10 miles from Siler City, in Chatham County, North Carolina, there's a near-perfect circle of barren ground roughly 40 feet across. Grass grows up to the edge and stops dead, and the wiry grass inside dies when transplanted. The North Carolina Department of Agriculture tested the ground and found it sterile, poisoned by high salt content. That sounds like the answer. It isn't quite, and here's where I got stuck. Natural salt licks do form in the wild, but in irregular, ragged blotches. They don't form near-perfect 40-foot circles in a hardwood forest, and the circle has held its shape across generations, which points to something ongoing. Visitors who leave stakes inside overnight find them moved by morning. The state's tourism office admits the cause remains unexplained. High salt explains why nothing grows. It explains nothing about the shape. So if the chemistry is solved, but salt licks form as ragged patches, what keeps redrawing a perfect 40-foot circle the forest refuses to grow back over? 14. The Wampus Cat. Most people assume a famous Appalachian monster has a clear origin, usually an old Cherokee legend handed down for centuries. When I went looking for that legend, it wasn't there. The Wampus Cat is described as a huge cat that walks upright, with glowing eyes and a scream like a woman's voice. It's a school mascot across the mountains south, and guides call it ancient Cherokee folklore, a woman cursed into half-cat form. Here's what unsettles the story. The etymology follows the word, not the legend, and finds catawampus in 19th century American dialect dictionaries, defined as a fierce imaginary animal, before any Cherokee version was recorded. No primary Cherokee source for the curse exists. and the sightings are real as events. In 1964, in Johnston County, North Carolina, the Goldsboro News-Argus reported an 8-foot, upright, hairy creature near Dean's Crossroads. Hundreds descended to hunt it, until the sheriff declared it a hoax to disperse the crowds. So if the oldest paper trail leads to a dialect word and not a Cherokee text, and the sightings draw hundreds chasing something nobody catches, who invented the Wampus Cat, and why are people still convinced it's out there? 13. The Greenbrier Ghost. You'd never expect a court to take testimony from a ghost. Officially, it didn't. But there's a West Virginia historical marker that says otherwise, and I had to go read it myself to believe it. In January 1897, Zona Heaster Shue was found dead on the floor of her home in Greenbrier County, West Virginia. Her husband, blacksmith Trout Shue, reached the body first, dressed her, and fixed a high collar and veil around her neck, then refused to let the doctor near the throat. The doctor wrote the cause as everlasting faint, then changed it to childbirth. Zona wasn't pregnant. Then her mother, Mary Jane Heaster, said Zona's spirit appeared 4 nights running, describing how Trout snapped her neck over no meat for supper. She took it to the prosecutor, who exhumed the body on the ghost story alone. The autopsy found exactly what she described: a broken neck, a crushed windpipe. 10 of 12 jurors wanted him hanged. So if the death was already ruled natural, and the only reason anyone reopened it was a mother's account of a ghost, how did she know about a broken neck no living person had yet seen? 12. The Fort Mountain Wall. You'd expect an ancient stone wall along a mountaintop to be a fort. The name itself tells you so. The dig told a different story. On the crest of Fort Mountain in Murray County, Georgia, runs a wall of dry-laid stone, no mortar, zigzagging roughly 850 feet along the ridge, with about 29 pits along it. When archaeologist Philip Smith excavated it in 1956, he expected the ordinary signs of human use: pottery, tools, charcoal. He found none of it. No artifacts, no charcoal, no trace anyone used it, which is where it stopped making sense to me. The leading theory says Middle Woodland peoples built it for ceremony around 2,000 years ago. But the wall runs downhill in places, encloses no water, and fails every test of military engineering. Too elaborate to be an accident, too useless to be a fort. The marker admits no one knows the answer. So if it defends nothing, holds no water, sheltered no one, and left behind not a single tool or ash, why did someone haul tons of stone up a mountain to build 850 feet of wall that served no purpose anyone could name? If you've got a favorite so far, tell me. Honestly, the comments on these tend to be better than the videos themselves, at least to me, and somebody watching this grew up in these hollers and knows them better than I ever will. If you're sticking around to the end, the subscribe button's right there too. Back to it. 11. The Gravity Hills. You'd expect gravity to behave the same everywhere. Put a car in neutral on a slope, it rolls downhill every time. At Mystery Hill near Blowing Rock, North Carolina, it appears to roll up. The standard explanation is almost certainly right: an optical illusion. When the true horizon is hidden by trees and terrain, the brain picks a false reference for level, and a downhill slope reads as uphill. So why include it among things that can't be explained? Because of a logical trap the debunking can't climb out of, and once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. To prove a slope is truly downhill, you reach for a spirit level or a plumb line, but both work by gravity itself. If you stood somewhere with a real gravitational anomaly, both tools would be pulled by that same anomaly and read normal in exactly the way that hides it. The illusion explains the hill. It cannot, even in principle, prove its own case. So if the one tool we'd use to test the ground is bent by the force we're testing, how could we ever tell an illusion from a real anomaly? 10. The Bell Witch. You might assume the best documented haunting in American history would be the most solid. It's often described as exactly that. The deeper I dug, the less I found. Between 1817 and 1821, the family of John Bell, a real farmer in Adams, Tennessee, who died in December 1820, was supposedly tormented by an invisible entity that spoke aloud and struck the children. Even Andrew Jackson is woven into the legend. Here's what almost no one repeats. Every detailed account traces back to one book, published in 1890 1794, 74 years later, by a newspaper editor named Martin Van Buren Ingram. He claimed it drew on a diary kept by Bell's son. That diary has never been produced. Researchers note no contemporary sources. The earliest mentions surface in the 1880s. So the real mystery isn't the ghost, it's the paper trail. If the diary was genuine, this is solid history. If it never existed, America's most famous haunting rests on one book and a source no one has seen. So if the whole case stands on a single diary never shown to exist, is the Bell Witch documented history or the most successful fiction in American folklore? 9. The Mound Builders. Most people, if they picture ancient American monuments, imagine them out west. Not stacked through the green foothills of Appalachia, but the region is dense with prehistoric earthworks. The Adena and Hopewell built them nearly 3,000 years ago, and later Mississippian peoples raised platform mounds across the southern mountains. In 2023, UNESCO named a complex of these Ohio earthworks a World Heritage Site, alongside the pyramids and Stonehenge. Here's the part that doesn't add up, and I find it genuinely puzzling. In the southern Appalachian highlands, the environment was a poor candidate for the maize surplus economy that fuels monumental mound building. The land shouldn't have supported the surplus required. Building giant mounds there was, by standard logic, irrational. They built them anyway, exactly where the model says they couldn't afford to. There's an older, uglier layer too. For decades, antiquarians like Warren Moorhead insisted a vanished, lost race built the mounds, a discredited myth that justified pushing native peoples off the land. The descendants were here all along. So if the highland environment couldn't support the surplus mound building requires, what drove people to haul earth into monuments precisely where it made no sense to build them? 8. The Sodder children. You'd expect that after a house fire, you find remains. Bodies don't simply cease to exist. That's the detail this case refuses to honor. On Christmas morning, 1945, the Sodder home near Fayetteville, West Virginia, burned down. The parents and 4 children escaped. 5 children, ages 5 to 14, did not. The coroner ruled it an accidental electrical fire, but searchers found no remains in the ashes. None. A telephone line had been cut, not burned. A man who had threatened George Sodder sat on the coroner's jury, and the fire chief buried a box he claimed held remains, which turned out to be beef liver. Then it gets stranger, and this is the part I can't shake. In 1967, Jenny Sodder opened her mail to find a photo of a man who looked unmistakably like her missing son Louis grown up. The family hired a private investigator. He drove off to follow the lead and was never heard from again. So if not one bone was found, the evidence was staged, and the investigator vanished too. Did 5 children die in that house at all? Or did someone make certain no one could prove otherwise? From here, the mysteries stop being curious. They start being heavy, because these mountains don't only swallow lights and sounds and old stone walls. Sometimes they take people, and the witnesses who were there never once changed their stories. 7. The Flatwoods Monster. When frightened witnesses report a monster, you expect the accounts to fall apart. Stories drift, people recant. These didn't, and that's what kept me reading. On the evening of September 12, 1952, in Flatwoods, West Virginia, 7 people, 6 of them children, led by a mother named Kathleen May, followed a bright object that streaked down behind a hilltop. At the top, in the dark, they reported a creature 10 feet tall with a glowing red face, a spade-shaped hood, and a choking mist around it. They ran, several sick for days. Kathleen May was on national CBS television within a week. The tidy, skeptical answer from investigator Joe Nickel is a barn owl, red eyes in a flashlight, a heart-shaped face, branches mistaken for a body. Clean, but it doesn't fit. The witnesses described the thing on the ground, moving toward them, not perched in a tree. And no barn owl emits a mist that leaves 7 people ill for days. So if the object in the sky was explained, but 7 witnesses got sick and never recanted in 70 years, what did they meet on that hilltop that an owl can't account for? 6. The Moon-Eyed People. You might assume the Cherokee were the first people in the southern Appalachians. Their own oral tradition says otherwise, and that's the part that pulled me in. Cherokee accounts, recorded in print as early as 1797 by the trader Benjamin Smith Barton, describe a people already there when the Cherokee arrived. Short, pale, bearded, with eyes so light-sensitive they saw only at night. The Moon-Eyed People, driven westward. In the 1840s, a farmer in Cherokee County, North Carolina, unearthed a soapstone statue of two figures with large crescent eyes, now in a Murphy museum. The fort mountain wall that defends nothing? Tradition credits them. Here's the friction, and it cuts both ways. The story passes through colonial traders and secondhand retellings, and may have been embellished into a vanished white race myth, one later used to argue Native peoples weren't the land's first owners. Yet no excavation has identified an earlier people behind that wall either. So if there's a carved statue, a wall no Cherokee claims to have built, and a memory recorded for over 2 centuries, was there really someone here before the first people? Or is the proof gone with whoever they were? 5. Joara and Fort San Juan. Ask most Americans where Europeans first settled this country's interior, and they'll say Jamestown, 1607. They're off by 40 years and hundreds of miles. In what's now Burke County, North Carolina, stood Joara, a Mississippian town. In January 1567, a captain named Juan Pardo built Fort San Juan there, 40 years before Jamestown, the earliest European settlement in the interior of the present-day U.S. For 4 centuries, it was erased, until archaeologist David Moore confirmed the site in 2013 by the burned foundations and a ditch cut through the town's sacred mound. Now, the part I find almost hard to believe: the fort lasted 18 months. In spring 1568, the Joara destroyed it, and at nearly the same moment, the other 5 forts Pardo built across hundreds of miles were destroyed too. Almost every Spanish soldier in the interior was killed, in what looks like a single coordinated uprising. The only account comes from one soldier who escaped. So if these were native towns separated by days of travel, with no riding and no horses, how did they coordinate a simultaneous strike across hundreds of miles, with no record of how the signal passed? 4. The Mothman. You'd expect a small-town monster sighting to stay a small-town story. A few witnesses, then a quiet fade. This one is welded to 46 deaths. Beginning in November 1966, around Point Pleasant, West Virginia, people reported a creature with a 10-foot wingspan and glowing red eyes. The first witnesses were 2 young couples, the Scarberrys and the Millettes, who said it chased their car at nearly 100 miles an hour near an abandoned munitions site. 100 more sightings followed that year. The skeptical answer is a sandhill crane off its range. But here's the one detail no bird survives: the thing that got me. Witnesses placed the red eyes in the creature's shoulders, not its head. No animal is built that way. Cranes can't hover or chase a car at highway speed, and are loud where witnesses described silence. Then, on December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge collapsed during rush hour. 46 died. Engineers traced it to a single fractured eyebar, but the sighting stopped almost the day the bridge fell. So if no creature is shaped like that, what were 100 people seeing, and why did it end the moment 46 neighbors died? 3. The disappearance of Dennis Martin. Sometimes these mountains take a place, sometimes a light, and on June 14, 1969, in front of his own family, they took a 6-year-old boy in under 3 minutes. Dennis Martin was on a Father's Day camping trip near Spencefield in the Great Smoky Mountains. The children split up. Dennis went one way alone, and moments later, he was gone. What followed became one of the largest searches in National Park Service history. 1,400 volunteers, the National Guard, and Green Berets from Fort Bragg, the only use of Army Special Forces in a civilian park search. They found nothing, but here's the detail that has never sat right with me. Rangers cast child-sized footprints found along a trail, 1 foot shod, 1 bare. Dennis's parents said they were too large to be his. Whose they were has never been explained. And miles away that evening, a man named Harold Key reported an enraged scream and a rough man carrying something through the brush. So, if 1,400 searchers found nothing in a few square miles, whose were the prints that weren't Dennis's? And what did Harold Key see carried through the trees? 2. The age of the rock. You might think old means a few million years. For the core of these mountains, you have to push much further, and I had to sit with the number a while. Deep in the Blue Ridge lies basement rock formed during the Grenville mountain building event, roughly 1.1 billion years ago. One block, the Mars Hill terrain, may run as old as 1.8 billion. The U.S. Geological Survey describes these rocks with a single careful word: enigmatic. Sit with that scale. This rock was already 1 billion years old before the first dinosaur walked. It is older than bone, older than wood, older than the first flower. There is stone here older than the rings of Saturn, and one piece may not belong here. Isotope studies suggest the Mars Hill terrain originated in the ancient core of what is now South America, then welded onto this continent over 1 billion years ago, and left behind when the land masses tore apart. So if a slab of the Appalachians may have been born on another continent and carried here before life had a backbone, how much of the ground we call American bedrock was never originally ours? 1. We end where it all began: the mountains that refuse to die. We opened at the top of these mountains, with lights nobody can explain. We end at the bottom, the ground all 20 rest on, the same impossible foundation. Here's the thing I checked 3 times, because it didn't seem possible. The Appalachians are older than the Atlantic Ocean. The range existed when Pangaea was whole, before the ocean to the east had begun to open. And by every rule of geology, they should be gone. A range with no plates colliding beneath it has no engine, and erosion should grind it flat. Yet Mount Mitchell rises 6,684 feet, and parts have risen again in the last few million years, with nothing pushing them up. Geologists guess a slab peeled away beneath the crust. A guess, not an answer. So that is Appalachia, older than the ocean beside it, built on rock older than bone, hiding seas and lights and lost children, and still, after 500 million years, refusing to lie down. So if these mountains have outlived the rules that govern every other range on Earth, what holds them up, and what else are they hiding? After these 21 mysteries, tell me in the comments which one you're calling fake until you look it up for yourself. That's the whole point. Appalachia doesn't need exaggerating. The truth already does the work. Subscribe and explore these mountains with me. I'm not done here.